Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Islamic History Podcast Exclusive, the podcast exclusively for Patreon subscribers of the Islamic History Podcast. And also got to say, Ramadan Mubarak. I hope your Ramadan is going well. We're about halfway through it at the recording of this episode. So, inshallah, I hope we all gain the blessings of Ramadan. Ameen. So we are continuing our story on... sorry about that. Can't really drink water right about now, so forgive me if I cough a little bit here and there. But we are going to continue our story on the brief caliphate, if we can call it that, of Ibn Zubayr. Mostly the struggle of Ibn Zubayr versus the Umayyads. So let's begin with a quick recap of the last episode. And much of the last episode was actually a recap of the first two seasons. Actually season 2 and season 3 of the Islamic History Podcast. Within the last episode, that is, we discussed the events from the death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the death of his grandson Hussein ibn Ali radiallahu anhum. And then we also discussed in the previous episode, the Battle of Al-Harra, let me get that pronunciation correct, as well as the pillaging of Medina by the Syrian soldiers sent by Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And this Syrian army was led by Yazid ibn Muawiyah's general named Muslim ibn Uqba. So now that Medina has been pacified and the Umayyads have reasserted their control over Medina, they are now headed on to Mecca to deal with Ibn Zubayr, who has been hiding out in Mecca pretty much since the beginning of Yazid's caliphate. Yazid ibn Muawiyah has tried to exert his authority over the Hijaz, which includes, of course, Mecca and Medina. He now has Medina, but Ibn Zubayr, even though he has not publicly rebelled against Yazid, he has also not taken bay'ah. He has not given him the pledge. And Ibn Zubayr is also claiming to seek refuge at the Kaaba. In reality, Ibn Zubayr is really trying to figure out what he's going to do. He has not... Maybe he does have a plan. It doesn't seem as if he really has a plan, quite frankly, in reading this. But maybe he has a plan that he's just not sharing with people. But at this stage, he knows he doesn't want to give bay'ah to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. But it doesn't seem as if he's quite ready to come out against the Umayyads and actually begin to fight or struggle for the caliphate. But now he's going to have to make a decision. His reluctance to accept the bay'ah from the people of Medina allowed the people of Medina to choose someone else. We mentioned how they had chose a Sahaba in the previous episode. They had chose one of the Sahabas who was also a son of a Sahaba. This Sahaba was also the son of a martyr. That was Abdullah ibn Hanzala. He was the people of Medina chose him as their leader when Ibn Zubayr refused to accept their bay'ah, and we can't say that resulted in the defeat of the army of Medina or the people of Medina, because quite frankly, the Syrian army was really just a better army, all in all. But still, that lack of unity, I think, kind of hurt Ibn Zubayr. You're going to see this as a theme throughout Ibn Zubayr's caliphate, this indecision, this inability to make a firm, concrete decision and move forward with it. So, while I'm really going into depth right now in this series, I have studied Ibn Zubayr's caliphate in the past, and it seems as if indecision and his ability to move forward with resolution on the matter hurt him in many ways, and we'll see how that plays out in this episode. So now the Syrian army, and that's what we're going to call the Umayyad army most of the time. We're going to mostly call them Syrian army because it's just easier to say, and the geography, knowing where Syria is and the Hijaz is and where Iraq is, I think that kind of helps you kind of put these different groups into sides. Hopefully, it helps me understand it better. So the Syrian army versus the Medina army or Mecca army, or so forth and so on. But I may use Umayyad instead of Syrian, so we'll see how it goes. So the Syrian army now heads towards Mecca. They are led by the general chosen by the current Caliph, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and this general is named Muslim ibn Uqba. But as we mentioned in the previous episode, Muslim ibn Uqba was an old man. Despite his brutality, he was an old man, and he was also very sick. And he died en route to Mecca. So in between Mecca and Medina, Muslim ibn Uqba died on a mountain named Washallah, just outside of Mecca, on the 24th of Muharram 64 AH. I don't know why I have such detail about such a minor character, but I do. But he was succeeded by another general named Hussein ibn Ali as-Sakuni, who was his deputy. And he was chosen by Yazid ibn Muawiyah to succeed Muslim ibn Uqba when and if Muslim ibn Uqba died. So now we have this man named Hussein ibn Ali as the leader of the Syrian army. So the Syrian army now sets up. If you've ever been to Mecca, there are several, there are a bunch of hills surrounding the city, even though the current Saudi government is very rapidly wiping them out, rapidly blowing up those mountains and building hotels and stuff around them. But some of them are still there. At least they were when I went there a few years ago. But there are lots of mountains surrounding Mecca, and particularly looking down on the Kaaba. So the Syrian army began to set up in these mountains and hills surrounding Mecca. And by this time, Ibn Zubayr had actually made up his mind to actually become a leader and accept the Caliphate, or come out against the Umayyads. Now that the Syrian army is right there on his doorstep, he really has no choice. And so he has now begun to take pledges from the people of Mecca. And most of the people of Mecca, except for, of course, the Umayyads, most of the people of Mecca want to side with Ibn Zubayr. They have no love for the Umayyads. They have no love for the Syrians. They know what they did in Medina. And so they want to side with Ibn Zubayr. The Khawarij, there are Khawarij in Mecca also. They are not just relegated to Iraq. There are Kufa and Basra. There are Khawarij, and remember, I know you know what the Khawarij is. I think most of you know. I'm going to try to explain real quick. The Khawarij were a dissident group, and I think I explained this in the past episode. They were a dissident group that believed the entire Muslim Ummah, except for those who agreed with them, the entire Muslim Ummah had gone astray, and that the only way to bring unity and stability back to the Muslim world was to get rid of pretty much every single Muslim leader there was, unless, of course, that Muslim leader conformed to whatever they believed. And they were willing to do this through violence. And the Khawarij, many of them had infiltrated Mecca, and they didn't really care for Ibn Zubayr either, though since he hadn't come out yet as a leader up until the army had arrived, they were more tolerant of him. They had not tried to hurt him or kill him or anything like that. But now that the army was coming, the Syrian army was surrounding Mecca, the Khawarij decide to temporarily give Ibn Zubayr the bay'ah, but only in the defense of Mecca. This was not a full-fledged bay'ah where they're committed and completely devoted to him. This was only in the defense of Mecca. And so the battle starts, and Ibn Zubayr and his deputies, they start leading soldiers out there and columns out there to fight the Syrians. And just like in Medina, they weren't doing pretty well. The Syrian army is just they were just much better trained, they were much better equipped. They had much more experience after fighting the Byzantines for so many years and fighting against the Byzantines in Constantinople, of all places, which is a very difficult city to besiege. And so the Syrians just had their troops way more stronger, just much stronger and better soldiers than anything Ibn Zubayr could muster. And so in the beginning, in the early stages of this battle, Ibn Zubayr's forces are really obliterated. They're beaten back and wiped out pretty quickly by the Syrian army. Even Ibn Zubayr's brother, whose name was Munzir ibn Zubayr, he was killed while fighting against the Syrians. And so the first time these two forces clashed, the Syrians defeat Ibn Zubayr, and Ibn Zubayr's army have to withdraw and run back into Mecca. And the only reason the Syrians didn't wipe his army out was because darkness came. That's the only thing that held them back. And after that first encounter, Ibn Zubayr realizes that he just can't go out there and fight them man to man and one-on-one like that. So he decides to just hole up in Mecca now, because otherwise his forces will be wiped out in any more direct conflicts against the Syrians. And so with the Muslims on Ibn Zubayr's side, they're all Muslim, the Syrians and the people who were with Ibn Zubayr, they're all Muslim. But with Ibn Zubayr's side now holed up inside of Mecca, the Syrians, they now set up catapults all around on these hills surrounding Mecca and start launching stones and large pieces of wood into Mecca. Basically, they are besieging Mecca. I told you they were on a different level. We mentioned during the Sirah period that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the companions had some very rudimentary forms of mechanized weaponry. They had something kind of like a battering ram, but they definitely didn't have anything like catapults or any sort of, throwing weapons like this. So this shows you how advanced the Muslim army had come, and also how much the Syrian army was advanced. I don't think Ibn Zubayr had really anything to counter these catapults. I'm sure he has seen them before. He was once part of the army himself, so I'm sure he has seen catapults before. But let's face it, there are very few trees in Mecca, so it's kind of hard to build catapults out of wood in a place like Mecca. The Syrians, however, they had all this stuff already together, and so now they start launching missiles basically into Mecca. And this siege of Mecca lasts for 60 days. And during this siege, the Kaaba starts to burn. The Kaaba, yes, the house of Allah, the Kaaba began burning on the 31st day. And there are two different stories as to what caused the Kaaba to burn. One story from Tariq al-Tabari says that one of Ibn Zubayr's soldiers might have had a spear might have a burning spear basically, and that burning spear caught onto the cloth that covered the Kaaba. The Kaaba's covering, I think it's called the Kiswa. It caught onto that, and that caught on fire, and then that caused the Kaaba to burn. Another story is that some of the missiles that the Syrians were flying into Mecca, some of them were flaming wood or boulders covered in pitch and lit a fire and thrown into Mecca. And that one of those crashed into the Kaaba or hit the Kaaba and caused the cover to burn. And so the Kaaba started to burn. Now, honestly, I don't really know how extensive this damage was, but I believe it was fairly extensive in the fact that afterwards, Ibn Zubayr had to rebuild the Kaaba, and he rebuilt it in a way that he had enlarged it. And we'll get into that later on. And that's several episodes later. But it seems as if the damage was fairly extensive. It wasn't so bad as to damage the Black Stone. I haven't heard that the Black Stone was damaged during this battle. At least I'm not sure it was. But definitely the Kaaba caught on fire. And it seemed to have been a pretty extensive fire. Eventually, of course, the fire is put out. And later on, Ibn Zubayr goes ahead and resumes in the reconstruction of the Kaaba. And so Mecca is under siege for about 60 days. And during this period of time, Yazid ibn Muawiyah dies. Yazid ibn Muawiyah, the Caliph, the son of the Caliph Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, Yazid ibn Muawiyah died on the 14th day of Rabi al-Awwal in the year 64 AH, 64 years after the Hijrah. He was roughly 39 to 40 years old. We're not sure about what caused his death, but his death will be the catalyst for a lot more confusion to come. After Yazid ibn Muawiyah dies, his son, whose name is Muawiyah II, Muawiyah ibn Yazid, his son, who there are different narrations as to how old Yazid's son was. We'll just call Muawiyah II to make it easier. Muawiyah II, I've seen one story that says he's about 13 years old. He was about 13 years old when he became the caliph, or when he succeeded his father. Another story that he was about 20 years old. I believe he's probably closer to 20, but maybe he was still a teenager. So let's say somewhere between 18, 19 years old when he became caliph. But the thing is that he was a sickly boy. He had always been sick, and he fell into a very serious sickness soon after his father, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, died. And so Muawiyah II was only caliph for about, I've heard, once again, different narrations, as little as 40 days, as much as 3 months, but he was only caliph for a little while. But he doesn't really play that big of a role in the story. The main thing is that Yazid ibn Muawiyah has died, and so now, even though his son Muawiyah II assumes the caliphate, that assumption, because he's such a sick boy and because he is not really seen as a leader, he's not really known outside of Syria, really outside of Damascus, there's a whole lot of uncertainty surrounding the caliphate right now. Very quickly regarding Yazid ibn Muawiyah, we're just going to briefly discuss just a little bit about his attributes, not much, because he has so many problems, not really much good we can say about him. Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he was the son of a Sahaba. His father, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, was a Sahaba. And Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he was well versed in Islamic knowledge and in Arabic poetry. He, however, had several flaws, personal flaws. These were such as he was, as you've seen in some of the episodes from season 3, I believe, he was neglectful in his prayers at times. He also, there are also accusations that he drank wine, and he basically engaged in the services of dancing girls. And you can see if those accusations are true, and they're all widespread. There are many stories about him drinking alcohol and having dancing girls at parties. If those accusations are true, you can see why the Muslims of Medina and of Mecca wouldn't tolerate him as their leader, as the leader of the Muslim world, and as the representative or the successor of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So think about it today. If you just take an imam of a masjid or a Muslim community, just in the United States, not even going to talk about in the Muslim world, just in the United States, with all the corruption we have in the United States, and with all the corruption we have in the Muslim Ummah, if we had an imam who drank alcohol and had dancing girls, and the equivalent of a dancing girl in today's term is a stripper, if you knew of an imam who drank wine and had strippers at his house, you would want nothing to do with him. That imam would not be able to have, if he had like a secret life and it came out, that imam would lose all credibility. No one would go to his khutbahs. He would be disparaged, and no one would want anything to do with him. That is today. So you can imagine just how much people, the Muslims, these Muslims who were Sahaba, companions of Prophet Muhammad, and the sons and daughters of the companions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can imagine how disgusted they would have been with Yazid ibn Muawiyah with these same accusations. So just want to keep that in mind. And on top of that, even if those accusations are not true, and I believe that they are, even if they are not true, you still have the fact that under his watch, Hussein ibn Ali and several members of his family were killed by his governor, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And on top of that, he then sent an army to Medina, not just to put down a rebellion. That's one thing in and of itself. But then he ordered that army to pillage Medina for 3 days. And in that pillage, they weren't just breaking pots and killing goats. They were killing people, killing Sahaba, killing the children of the Sahaba. And they killed several people in this battle, in this pillage, basically, and wrecked Medina, set Medina afire practically. And then his governor went and killed people who even hesitated to give Yazid ibn Muawiyah the pledge or the bay'ah. So Yazid ibn Muawiyah was not anywhere near our ideal of a Muslim leader. He had several problems. So with that being said, there's really not much more to say about Yazid ibn Muawiyah. I don't want to spend too much time with him. His time in history is gone as far once he dies, and history moves on after him, without him. So now his son Muawiyah II has become the caliph, and the question of the caliphate really is still up in the air. But now the word gets down to Mecca that Yazid ibn Muawiyah has died. And it seems Ibn Zubayr found out about Yazid ibn Muawiyah's death before the Syrian soldiers did. So with the besieging going on, Ibn Zubayr and his soldiers start shouting out to the Syrians that they are fighting for a dead man. And at first the Syrians question themselves as to what these guys are talking about. But the news gets to them as well, and they understand and learn that their leader, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, is now dead. And so Ibn Zubayr, he requests a meeting with Hussein ibn Numair, the general of the Syrian army. And so they do meet and they talk. And Hussein ibn Numair, he asks for permission to allow his soldiers to make tawaf around the Kaaba. Ibn Zubayr goes ahead and grants that permission. Kind of a strange thing here, but once again, these are all Muslims. Hussein ibn Umair, he then encourages Ibn Zubayr to come with him to Damascus and take up the caliphate. Hussein ibn Umair, he probably doesn't know that Muawiyah II has become caliph, and even if he did, he probably knows that he's a sickly young man and probably won't last very long or probably won't be very strong in that position. And Hussein ibn Umair, he wants Ibn Zubayr to come with him back to Damascus and accept the pledge, accept the bay'ah. Hussein ibn Umair, the Syrian general, he promises Ibn Zubayr that the people will recognize his character. They know Ibn Zubayr is a good Muslim. They know he's a son of a highly respected Sahaba. They know that he is a Sahaba himself. Ibn Zubayr was young when the Prophet ﷺ died, but he was still alive. So he is still a Sahaba himself. And he promises Ibn Zubayr that the people will give him the pledge. And Hussein ibn Umair, he then confirms and promises Ibn Zubayr that he will protect him himself. Him and his soldiers will protect Ibn Zubayr. Only thing he wants in return, only thing Hussein ibn Umair wants in return is amnesty for his soldiers for the fighting they did at Medina and Mecca. Seems as if even Hussein ibn Umair knew that they were doing the wrong thing. But supposedly, I guess they're following orders, and so that's what soldiers do. But that's between them and Allah. So Hussein ibn Umair, he offers this suggestion to Ibn Zubayr. And Ibn Zubayr refused. There are many reasons for his refusal. Well, there are two main reasons for why he may have refused. Some say it's because that he just felt safer being closer to the Kaaba. He had being close to the Kaaba and being in Mecca all this time had kept him safe thus far, and he wanted to stay there. Others say that he really didn't want to pardon those soldiers who were responsible for killing the Muslims of Mecca and Medina. And so Ibn Zubayr refuses to accept Hussein ibn Umair's offer. This is once again an example of Ibn Zubayr's indecision. While you can say that maybe he made a strong decision not to accept it, I mean, to me, this is when your enemy or former enemy has no leader and saying, come on, come with me and I'll make you the leader. This is an opportunity that Ibn Zubayr probably should have jumped on, but Ibn Zubayr didn't do that, and it may have cost him. We'll see how it turns out. Anyway, so Ibn Zubayr, he allowed the Syrians to make the tawaf around the Kaaba. Hussein ibn Umar is very upset with Ibn Zubayr for not accepting his offer. He questions his intelligence, because he had heard that Ibn Zubayr was such an intelligent man. He's like, I don't know what these people are saying. You're so intelligent. You're acting very unintelligent and refusing my offer. Hussein ibn Umar is very upset. He kind of insults Ibn Zubayr, not directly, but kind of insults him. And then, nothing else to do. There's no reason to fight anymore. Ibn Zubayr won't come with him. And so the Syrian army, they pack up and they return to Syria. And so Ibn Zubayr remains in Mecca. He does eventually extend his control over Medina. In Medina, now with Yazid being dead, Medina once again throws off his authority, basically. And Ibn Zubayr extends control over Medina. So he kind of pretty much has control over much of the Hijaz now. But the rest of the Muslim world is in chaos. Syria is in, even though Muawiyah II is the leader, he doesn't take any part in the leadership. He's very sick. Most of the work is done by his deputies and advisors and ministers and stuff. So, and everyone pretty much, he's very detached from the whole thing. He really wants nothing to do with the Caliphate. He didn't even want to accept the Caliphate. It was kind of forced on him as the son of Yazid. And so Muawiyah II is really an ineffectual and absent leader. So that leaves us with Iraq. Let's turn towards Iraq. This will be very brief. Remember Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad? He is the son of Ziyad ibn Abihi. Remember Ziyad ibn Abihi? Abihi, which is what he's called, it means his father. So Ziyad ibn Abihi was called Ziyad, the son of his father, because nobody knew who his father was. Ziyad ibn Abihi pretended, along with Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, they pretended that Muawiyah's father, Abu Sufyan, sired Ziyad in an illegitimate relationship. And so basically Muawiyah was saying that Ziyad ibn Abihi was his half-brother from his father's extramarital affair. And most people believe that was a lie and that they just did that. That was just something that these two cooked up for political expediency. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad was the son of Ziyad ibn Abihi. Ziyad ibn Abihi was Muawiyah's governor over Basra and Kufa in Iraq. And after Ziyad ibn Abihi died, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, his son, took over. And Ziyad was very cruel, and Ubaidullah was even worse. So Ubaidullah was the one who authorized the army and sent the army that wound up killing Hussein ibn Ali and his family. So now Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he is the ruler in Basra and Kufa for that matter, but right now he's in Basra. And of course, word arrives in Basra that Yazid ibn Muawiyah has died. And so they go ahead and pledge allegiance to Muawiyah II, but then a few months later, he dies also. Muawiyah II was a sickly young man, as we mentioned. He didn't last too long, and eventually he dies. And so now there's no one to accept the Caliphate. If Muawiyah II was only 19 years old at the most, he certainly did not have a son old enough to become the Caliph. And so it's unsure of who is the Caliph. Now, bear in mind, I jumped about 2 or 3 months after the siege of Mecca. So the siege of Mecca ends. Ibn Zubayr kind of extends his control over Mecca and Medina. The Syrian army returns to Syria. And so 2 to 3 months later, Muawiyah II dies. And now there is no Caliph right now over the Muslim world. And so Ubaidullah, who is still the ruler in Basra, he decides to try to get Basra to choose him as their leader. However, within this time, Ibn Zubayr has got himself together a little bit, and now he starts sending his representatives to different parts of the Muslim world to get people to pledge allegiance to him. And Ibn Zubayr has sent a man named Salama ibn Ubaid to Basra to begin recruiting soldiers and building up support for him in Basra. And eventually, within a few days, Salama's work is proving pretty successful, and he now has enough people around him. Remember, Salama is Ibn Zubayr's representative in Basra. Salama now has enough people representing or siding with Ibn Zubayr that they can now challenge Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Let me go back a little bit. After Muawiyah II died, really after Yazid ibn Muawiyah died, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad's status begins to drop. Both of these two governors of Iraq, Ziyad and his son Ubaydullah, both of them were really attached to first Muawiyah and then Yazid. With Yazid's death, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad's status really starts to fall, and people were already hating him in Kufa and Basra anyway for being involved with really ordering the death and the killing of Hussein ibn Ali. Also, Yazid ibn Muawiyah blamed Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad for killing Hussein ibn Ali. And ironically, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad blamed Yazid ibn Muawiyah for ordering him to kill Hussein ibn Ali. They're both basically blaming each other for Hussein ibn Ali's death, and they're both equally responsible. Maybe Ubaydullah was more responsible, but both of their hands are dirty in that one. That's neither here nor there, though. But Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad now, he wants to try to consolidate his control over first Basra and then Kufa now that there is no caliph. And there's even some suggestions that he was trying to establish his own little kingdom or emirate or caliphate in Iraq of his own, because him and his father had been there for so long. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, after he heard of the death of Muawiyah II, he calls the people of Basra to the masjid, and he encourages them to choose someone of their own while Syria is in chaos. Because the leadership is in chaos because there's no caliph right now. Muawiyah II is dead. And so he encourages the people to choose a leader, but in doing so, he promotes himself, though. He said, choose someone of your own, choose whoever you want. This is basically Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad talking. Choose whoever you want, and I'll go along with them. However, here are my credentials. Revenue is up. Your salaries have been increased. We have been the country is stable. Your flocks are doing good. Your crops are doing well. You know that I'm one of you. I was born here, and I was born and raised here. My father was governor here, and I'm governor here. I have defeated the dissidents and brought stability and all this sort of stuff. So he encourages him to choose someone, but in doing so, he also promotes himself. And the people in the masjid, the people of Basra, while he is talking, they go ahead and choose. They agree with him and say, yes, we'll give you bay'ah. We choose you. We choose you. And so they give him basically bay'ah. But as soon as he leaves the masjid, they begin to wipe their hands on the wall. So when you give bay'ah, we don't really do it anymore, but when bay'ah is given, the leader would hold out his hand, and then the followers would grasp his hand with their right hand, sort of giving him their pledge. That's how bay'ah is given. A leader would hold out his hand, and then this is done by Abu Bakr. Umar did it when he first clasped Abu Bakr's hand, just a few hours after the Prophet ﷺ died, and then everyone followed suit, and that's how Abu Bakr became the caliph. And I presume that was an Arab tradition before that. I don't really know, but definitely that tradition from Umar giving the bay'ah to Abu Bakr has continued on down, and even to now, people still do it, though we don't really have caliphates and stuff like that anymore. But the point is that that's how the bay'ah was given. And so when they wipe their hands on the wall, they are symbolically basically saying, we wipe this man's stain off of us. That bay'ah was not, they gave it to him then because perhaps they were afraid of him. Perhaps they were just used to him being there. Perhaps they didn't really have time to think about it. But as soon as he was gone, they wanted nothing to do with him. And they were basically saying, some of the quotes were like, this man wants to lead us in both unity and discord. Who does he think he is? Basically saying that Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad wants us to follow him when the Muslim empire is unified and when the Muslim empire is fragmented. We're not going to follow. They didn't like him. They didn't like him because he was cruel, just like his father. And he also, once again, he killed Hussein ibn Ali. And so they wanted nothing to do with him. But Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad doesn't know that. But eventually he begins to get the idea, because he is nominally the leader. He's still sitting in the governor's house. He's still walking around with an entourage. He's still, leading the prayers and stuff like that. But otherwise, his authority does not extend beyond the governor's household. He gives orders and nobody listens to him. He tries to arrest people, and the tribes or the different people block his soldiers from arresting people. No one wants to pay him any sort of taxes or anything like that. And so his authority is just nothing, basically, in Basra. He has sent a representative to Kufa to try and get them as well to give him the bay'ah. And as soon as his representative arrives in Kufa, people start pelting him with stones and chase his representative out of Kufa. So Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, his authority is almost all but gone. And it's just a matter of time. At least he can kind of see things turning. It's just a matter of time before the people get tired of him and they decide to actually maybe even get rid of him. And so when Ibn Zubayr's representative arrives in Basra and starts recruiting for Ibn Zubayr, Ubaidullah is kind of scared. And eventually the few followers of Ubaidullah, his soldiers and stuff, they are outnumbered by the people clamoring to join Ibn Zubayr. The people were willing and ready to join anybody in Basra, anyone but the Umayyads, anyone but Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. And so when Ibn Zubayr representative arrives, his name was Salama, but we mentioned that already. When Salama arrives representing Ibn Zubayr, people are ready to go straight for him. And so Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he is running out of options. The military now turns against him because he kind of had the military on his side, but now they are starting to turn against him. They're not really listening to him anymore. His own brothers don't want to help him. And so Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he has no choice but to flee. And so with the tide in Basra quickly turning to Ibn Zubayr, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad flees to Basra, and he takes with him most of the city's money. And so first he goes to a family friend asking him to help smuggle him out of Basra, because there are now groups and people patrolling the street looking for Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, now that Ibn Zubayr is pretty much in control of Basra now. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he goes from friend to friend to friend, and finally he settles in with one of his reluctant supporters, somebody who doesn't really want to support him, but kind of has some sort of loyalty to him based on some favors that Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad had done for him in the past. This man's name was Mas'ud ibn Amr, and Mas'ud was the chief of the Azd clan in Basra. But he doesn't really want to help Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. He gives him like maybe 1 day or so to help him. But some sort of deep-seated loyalty, he decides to go ahead and give Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad some cover for the time being and hide him while the people are looking for him. And that's where we're going to stop. We're going to stop there. In the next episode, inshallah, we will discuss how the Umayyads fully lose control of Iraq. They pretty much have lost Basra by now. They're going to lose Kufa soon after that. And we are going to continue to follow the plights and the actions and the story of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, both in Iraq and Syria. His story is not over. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he's an interesting person. There's more to come from him. So until then, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.